Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk today about Nelson Mandela. And yes, I really think Nelson Mandela was a good man. He needs to be admired. Now, I did not agree with a lot of his economic policies and some of his relaxed criminal justice policies. And I think that's one of the reasons that South Africa's kind of in the state that it is today. But overall, Nelson Mandela was good for South Africa. And he is one of the greatest South Africans and one of the greatest people to have ever lived. Now, I think he gets a bum rap as a terrorist, which when he was engaging in sabotage, he made sure that he did not kill or attack people, and it was installations that he sabotaged. And yes, he got sentenced to prison for 27 years, but he befriended his jailer and he forgave the people who imprisoned him. And he learned the Afrikaans language in prison. And even though the Afrikaners were by and large the ones who oppressed him and the ones who jailed him, he said he admired the Afrikaners because the Afrikaner South Africans rebelled against the British in the Boer War. And he thought that the Afrikaners were freedom fighters as well. And he admits he admired the Afrikaners in spite of the Afrikaners oppressing him. And that took a lot of guts and courage. Also, he forgave his captors, and when he was in prison in Robben Island, he cheered for any rugby team that played against South Africa. South Africa's rugby team, their mascot was the Springboks, and their colors were green and gold. When he was in prison in Robben Island, him and all the other political prisoners did that. But when he got out of prison, he decided to keep the Springbok team and carry on with Springbok rugby and let the Springboks keep the green and gold. And that united the nation in the 1995 Rugby World Cup. And Nelson Mandela told a lot of his supporters it was not time for petty revenge. It was time to build a new South Africa. And the Afrikaners and all white South Africans were just as much of a part of South Africa as Nelson Mandela and all the black South Africans were, but also the Indian South Africans, people who came from India many years ago to come to South Africa, and also the coloreds. And South Africa is the only nation in the world that uses the term colored, and where it's not a derogatory term. The term colored is basically mixed race people who had ancestors that were black South Africans as well as white South Africans. And colored culture is probably more similar to African American culture than is black culture in South Africa. But that's a different video, different topic. But Nelson Mandela considered South Africa to be a rainbow nation, and his goal was to make South Africa a rainbow nation. Okay? And his supporters booed and jeered him for continuing with the Springbok rugby and the Springbok team at first. And he was booed speaking to audiences wearing a Springboks cap and a Springbok shirt, but he chose to do that anyway. And South Africa won the 1995 World Cup, Rugby World Cup. They won it against New Zealand, and New Zealand was the heavy favorites. And, okay, Nelson Mandela, a little bit of background information. He was born in 1918, on July 18th, 1918, and his birthday now is called Mandela Day internationally. He was born in the Transkei village, the Transkei area of the East Cape province. So it was the Transkei area of the East Cape province, and it was specifically the Kunu village. The Kunu village. The English spelling is Qunu. Okay. And he grew up herding cattle. He grew up stick fighting. And his village was largely isolated from the rest of South Africa. So he did not experience a lot of that apartheid in that village. He did not experience a lot of the apartheid and racism as a child. He admits that in his autobiography, The Long Walk to Freedom, and also when he did many interviews before he passed away on December 5th, 2013. He died on December 5th, 2013. Well, anyways, Nelson Mandela, his father was a tribal chief, and specifically Mandela was of the Xhosa tribe, and particularly the Madiba clan. So he belonged to the Madiba clan within the Xhosa tribe. That's why many people, particularly a lot of black South Africans, call him Madiba. Even to this day, they call him Madiba. And his birth name was Roli Shasha. And that literally means, translated into, troublemaker. But when he went to out of the village for schooling, It was ran by white South Africans, and the white South African teachers gave him the name Nelson. They said he needed a Christian name, and they gave him the name Nelson. So that's why his full name is Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. And Mandela, yes, when he went to Fort Hare University, which was the most prestigious university in South Africa that black South Africans could attend. And then after that, he worked as a clerk in a law firm, and he decided to go to law school part-time and become a lawyer and joined the ANC, the African National Congress. And he was determined to fight for justice and to fight against any kind of unfairness. And when he joined the African National Congress, he wanted to make it a point that Indian South Africans and white South Africans, colored South Africans, they all could join. There were people in the African National Congress that accepted and supported what he did, but then there were also those that strongly opposed what he was doing in that area. But Nelson Mandela stayed true to his convictions and stayed true to his beliefs, saying that the African National Congress should be open to anybody of any race or color. And Nelson Mandela did that. Also, he criticized the Pan-African Congress, because the Pan-African Congress is basically one white person, one kill, or one settler, one kill, and the majority of South Africans, white or black, criticized those guys. That's why in the 1994 elections, Mandela's party and Mandela himself, African National Congress, received a majority of the votes. The Pan-African Congress received less than 1% of the votes. They're just a sick, disgusting party, and Nelson Mandela criticized them a lot in his book, The Long Walk to Freedom. Also, Mandela noted that about 60 to 70% of white South Africans wanted to negotiate a peaceful settlement with black South Africans, and 2 years before the 1994 elections, there was a referendum that only white South Africans could vote in, but the vote was to allow black South Africans to vote in the 1994 elections, and the majority of whites voted yes, saying that black South Africans should vote. And another reason Nelson Mandela, when he became president in 1994, he chose racial reconciliation. One, he firmly believed you should forgive and not hold a grudge. Now, that does not mean Nelson Mandela was not tough. He was a boxer. He learned how to box in prison, and there's a difference in defending somebody, defending yourself, and then holding a grudge and attacking a second or third generation, or attacking a person who had nothing to do with your oppression themselves. That was something Nelson Mandela spoke against. And one of the other reasons he did believe that, him as well as the previous president, de Klerk, South Africa had nuclear weapons at that time. And Nelson Mandela vowed for the destruction of those nuclear weapons because he did not want any South Africans, black or white, to get a hold of those nuclear weapons, because he was worried one group was going to use them on the other, and it could have easily destroyed South Africa had he not chosen a path of racial reconciliation and chose to make peace with de Klerk. And also another reason, he said that there were, even though the majority of the white South Africans did vote to give blacks the right to vote, as soon as that vote was passed, there was a lot of Nazi-like resistance from some Afrikaner groups. It wasn't the majority of the Afrikaners that supported that, but it was a lot of that went on. And had he chosen a path of militancy or revenge, it could have plunged South Africa into an extreme civil war, which could have resulted in genocide of both of the groups. And Nelson Mandela noted that as well. That's why him and Bishop Desmond Tutu chose to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Committee where there was forgiveness on both sides of the aisle, and everybody come who had guilt during the apartheid years, or was guilty of racial violence one way or the other during the apartheid years, to come state your grievances, ask for forgiveness, and say that I'm sorry. That was the best that could be done at the time, and him and Bishop Tutu were right to present that and to do that. Anyways, if anybody has any further questions, I recommend that people read the book, The Long Walk to Freedom, and that they watch the movie Invictus. Invictus is a really good movie that talks about the 1995 Rugby World Cup team. It's directed by Clint Eastwood, and Morgan Freeman portrays Nelson Mandela, and Matt Damon plays the captain of the Springboks rugby team, Francois Pienaar. And that is a really good movie and really talks about forgiveness and reconciliation and uniting a country regardless of political beliefs or race or color. So, anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless and bye-bye. Bye-bye.